Aerys I Targaryen died in the year 221 AC, and thus the throne passed to Maekar Targaryen, the new lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and the 14th Targaryen king to sit the Iron Throne since the conquest of Aegon. Maekar was never expected to sit the throne himself. He was the fourth son of King Daeron II and Queen Maria Martell. He was given the seat of Summerhall as his own, and was thus known as the Prince of Summerhall, the first Targaryen prince to hold the title. Maekar was said to have been a powerfully built man. He had violet eyes, and his hair was such a pale blonde that it was almost white, giving him the traditional Valyrian look. Maekar had straight hair and a square-cut beard, both being the colour of silver with a hint of gold. He was thickly built and powerful looking, but pox scars marred his cheeks. It is said that even in a good mood, Maekar could be prickly and impatient, and that he was a harsh man, quick to judge and condemn, and that this aspect of his personality was not limited to those below him, but also his family. Unlike his brother Baelor Breakspear, he was not charismatic and could not make friends and allies easily. After Baelor's accidental death by his hand, Maekar became even more stern and unforgiving, with many at court glad he was often away at his seat in Summerhall. Being effectively the Lord of Summerhall, Maekar had his own personal coat of arms, a three-headed Targaryen dragon, quartered. His armour was decorated with black curved dragon's teeth along the shoulders and down the back. He wielded a huge spiked mace rather than a longsword. As king, Maekar wore a crown of black iron points in a band of red gold, unlike any of the other, more ornate crowns of his predecessors. Maekar was the fourth son of King Daeron II Targaryen and Maria Martell. He had three older brothers, Baelor, Aerys, and Rhaegal, each who died, allowing him to become king. While King Daeron was no warrior, it was noted that two of his sons, specifically Baelor and Maekar, appeared all that he could have wished in a knight, lord or heir. Baelor was a tourney champion at 17, and Maekar seemed likely to show similar skill. As a fourth son, and low in the line of succession, Maekar was not expected to rule or hold any true power. He married young to Lady Diana Dane, and she gave him a total of 6 children, 4 sons and 2 daughters, Daeron, Aerion, Aemon, Daela, Aegon, and Rhae. Maekar would fight bravely during the first Blackfyre Rebellion in 196 AC, where he served as one of the Targaryen commanders. During the decisive battle in the war, the Battle of the Red Grass Field, it was his shield wall that held against the mad attack of his uncle, Aegor Rivers, Bittersteel, while his brother, Baelor Breakspear, attacked the Blackfyre army from the rear with a host of Stormlanders and Dornishmen. Maekar rallied what remained of Lord Donald Arryn's vanguard and made an unyielding anvil against which the rebels were hammered and destroyed, and the battle was won. Later, a song about the hammer and the anvil was made about the battle, with Baelor as the hammer and Maekar as the anvil. Baelor and Maekar played vital roles that day, and without the actions of the other, the maneuver would not have been possible, and in that case, who knows how the Red Grass Field could have played out. Despite his key role during the Blackfyre Rebellion, Maekar felt underappreciated. The victory was more attributed to his brother, Baelor, and the heirs of Daemon Blackfyre and Aegor Rivers, than to his effort. In other things, also stood in the shadow of his brothers, which wounded his pride. It was sometime around 207 to 208 AC that King Daeron Targaryen had 4 grown sons, 3 with sons of their own. He felt that having too many potential Targaryen heirs was dangerous, and sent Maekar's third son, Aemon, to the Citadel to become a Maester, despite his father's fierce objections. In truth, Aemon was well suited for the role of a Maester. It is also known that Maekar's wife, Diana Dane, died some time before 209 AC, but the specific details of her death are currently not known to us. In 209 AC, a tourney was held at Ashford Meadow. Maekar attended to see his sons, Daeron and Aerion, compete, and his fourth son, Aegon, was to squire for Daeron. Unfortunately, the tourney at Ashford Meadow proved disastrous for Maekar and his sons. Daeron drank himself into a stupor before reaching the tournament, losing track of his younger brother Aegon, who had joined the service of a hedge knight, Sir Duncan the Tall, in disguise as Egg. Aerion later would shame himself during the joust by deliberately killing his opponent's horse, something deeply looked down upon on the tourney field. When Sir Duncan attacked Aerion in defense of Tansel, an innocent puppeteer, Aerion demanded a trial by combat. Maekar supported Aerion's call for vengeance as well, as Daeron made accusations that Duncan had kidnapped Aegon. The trial by combat took the form of a trial by 7, which Maekar fought in himself. Maekar was unhorsed during the trial of 7, and he fought at the same time against his brother, Baelor Breakspear, and Lord Lionel Baratheon, both of whom supported Sir Duncan. Maekar delivered a lethal mace blow to Baelor's head. Baelor did survive the trial, but died soon after, when Steely Pate removed his helm. Maekar suspected that he would thereafter be in suspicion as a kinslayer. According to the chroniclers, Prince Maekar always bitterly regretted the passing of his brother, Baelor, and marked his anniversary every year. Dealing with the problem of his sons, Maekar banished Aerion to the Free Cities and offered Duncan a position in his personal guard to serve as a role model for Aegon. After Duncan refused, Maekar allowed Aegon to accompany the Hedge Knight in his travels as a squire, something utterly unheard of, especially for a prince of House Targaryen, and likely not something that would have been allowed if Maekar was further up the line of succession. Maekar made Aegon promise to keep his hair shaved or dyed to remain incognito, and also gave him a signet ring with his personal seal for protection in case of an emergency. In that same year of 209 AC, Maekar's father, King Daeron II, and nephews, Valar and Aerys, died from the Great Spring Sickness, meaning Maekar's brother succeeded to the throne as Aerys I Targaryen, and appointed their bastard uncle, Brynden Rivers, Bloodraven, as Hand of the King. Maekar had expected to be appointed Hand, and could not get along with Lord Bloodraven, so he withdrew from the court to his residence at Summerhall. According to Sir Eustace Osgrey, Lord Gorman Peake, and Sir Carl the Cat, Maekar sulked and brooded at Summerhall, never forgiving his brother for his rejection. After the accidental deaths of Daeron's third son, Rhaegal, in 215 AC, and Rhaegal's son, Aelor, in 217, the childless King Aerys recognized his sole surviving brother, Maekar, as his heir, and Maekar became the Prince of Dragonstone. Later, during the Blackfyre Rebellion in 219 AC, Maekar was recognized for his leadership and courage, and key role in the war, defeating Aegon and Aegor Rivers. Aegor Rivers was captured in the battle, and Bloodraven and Maekar's son Aerion both urged Aegor be executed. But King Aerys was merciful and allowed Bittersteel to join the Night's Watch, a fate he managed to escape, and something that would come back to plague House Targaryen once more. It is noted that Maekar's sons, Aerion and Aegon, both fought well and bravely during the Third Blackfyre Rebellion. Thus, when King Aerys I died of natural causes in 221 AC, Maekar rose to the Iron Throne, and a new age of Westeros began. By the time King Maekar Targaryen rose to the Iron Throne, he was in his 40s, with his wife, Diana Dane, having died sometime between the years 201 and 209 AC, meaning he was a widower when he became king. Strangely, as a reasonably young man at his wife's death, Maekar never remarried, which is something that could have been expected of a man in his position. While we can never know the true reason as to why he never took a new wife, one theory comes down simply to the number of Targaryen princes and claimants to the throne alive during the reign of Daeron II, and into that of Aerys I. It was part of the reasoning of Maekar's son Aemon being sent to the Citadel to become a Maester, to limit the number of claimants. Even after the death of Diana and the ascension to the Iron Throne of his elder brother, King Aerys I, the succession still seemed more than firm and nowhere near Maekar's line. Given Diana had given Maekar 6 children, it is also possible that he saw no practical need to take a new wife. Thus, despite the tragedy that allowed Maekar to become his brother's heir, the succession through his line still seemed secure in his 6 children. The first of his children was Prince Daeron Targaryen, who was born in 190 AC. He was often called Daeron the Drunkard, given his well-known alcoholism. Despite his issues with drink, Daeron was one of the rare Targaryens who had prophetic dragon dreams. Some claim the dreams and the things he saw were the reason behind his drinking. Daeron did not look like your typical Targaryen. He had sallow skin, sandy brown hair, and a blonde beard. He was also not much of a knight, disliking horses and swords, and avoiding any martial pursuits at all cost. In the year 209 AC, the then Prince Maekar sent his sons, Daeron and Aegon, to the tourney at Ashford Meadow, hoping that Daeron would give a good account of himself. While drinking at an inn, Daeron encountered the hedge knight Sir Duncan the Tall and told him that he had dreamed of him, ordering the knight to stay away from him. Aegon, who wanted to participate in the tourney, stayed incognito during this time and asked Duncan if he could be his squire. Though Duncan denied him this, Aegon left the inn and followed him to Ashford. Maekar sent Sir Roland Crakehall of the Kingsguard in search of Daeron and Aegon, then left Ashford himself to search for them both. When Daeron was found, he told his father a huge robber knight made off with Aegon and that he had spent the whole time pursuing them. The lie added evidence against Duncan after he was arrested for assaulting Aerion Targaryen, who had demanded Duncan face a trial by 7. Daeron apologized to Duncan for lying, saying he had not noticed Aegon was gone. He also said he had dreamed a great dragon would fall on Duncan, dead, but the knight would walk off alive. While Daeron did not know what it meant, he did know his dreams came true, and that he was frightened of Duncan. Daeron also informed Duncan that he would not fight in the trial, and after the first charge, he would stay on the ground, and would also withdraw his accusation. In the trial, Daeron was unhorsed by Sir Robin Risling, and did as he had promised, staying on the ground. But his own horse stepped on him, possibly breaking his foot, but otherwise Daeron was uninjured. Nevertheless, it turned out that Daeron's dream was a true prophecy, as Prince Baelor Breakspear died from injuries sustained during the trial. When Maekar ascended to the Iron Throne in 221 AC, this made Daeron the Prince of Dragonstone and the heir to the Iron Throne, though he preferred to be called the Prince of Summerhall, as he considered Dragonstone such a gloomy abode. Daeron went on to marry Kiera of Tyrosh, the widow of his cousin Valar Targaryen. Their daughter Valar was born in 222 AC, and proved to be a sweet but simple-minded girl. Sadly, Daeron died sometime before 233 AC, reputedly from a pox he caught from a whore. Maekar's second son was Prince Aerion Targaryen, born in the year 191 to 194 AC. He became his father's heir after the death of his elder brother. He is known in the history books as Aerion the Monstrous, or Aerion Brightflame. In his youth, Aerion was slim and of average height. He had curly, silver gold hair, deep violet eyes, and pale, unblemished skin, a much more traditional look for a Targaryen than his older brother Daeron. Aerion's face was said to be sculpted and imperious, with a high brow, sharp cheekbones, and a straight nose. He frequently wore clothing as bright as fire, in red and yellow and gold, and a black cloak bordered in scarlet satin. Even his horse was dressed in slashed orange and red fabric to look like flames. Aerion is often cited as one of the most clear examples of the madness that can affect members of House Targaryen. Cruel and arrogant, he thought he was a dragon in human form. Aerion was despised by his younger brother Aegon, who considered Aerion an inveterate liar. According to Raymond Fossaway, the prince was all smiles and courtesy in front of his father, but Aerion's true nature showed in front of others he deemed lower than him. Prince Daeron Targaryen also thought his brother was quite the monster. In the same year of 209 AC, Aerion also travelled to Ashford for the tourney at Ashford Meadow. He challenged Sir Humphrey Harding in the lists in the opening day of the tourney, but during the first run, he lowered his lance, and instead of striking Humphrey's shield, impaled his horse, causing it to crash and fall atop Humphrey. The horse died in agony, and Humphrey's leg was injured in what was deemed a hugely dishonourable act that shamed his father Maekar, who was furious at his son's actions. Lord Ashford awarded Aerion's charger to Humphrey as payment for the death of his horse, which infuriated Aerion. That night on the tourney grounds, a puppet show portraying a knight slaying a dragon offended Aerion, as the prince felt he was a dragon. He had his men-at-arms destroy the puppeteer's stall and their puppets, and deliberately broke the fingers of one of the puppeteers, a Dornish girl named Hansel. Sir Duncan the Tall, who Aegon, Aerion's brother, had called for help when the commotion started, then attacked Aerion, punching him and kicking him in the stomach and teeth. Aerion's men apprehended Duncan. It was only when Prince Aegon ordered them to stop they obeyed. But Duncan was arrested for striking a prince of House Targaryen. Aerion demanded the head of the hedge knight, which Prince Baelor would not allow, but could not deny Aerion a trial by combat. Aerion demanded instead a trial of 7, which Prince Baelor could not deny him. During the trial, Aerion put his lance through Sir Duncan's side and struck him from his saddle with a morning star. However, Sir Duncan refused to yield and used his skill as a brawler from the streets of Fleabottom to beat the prince down, hitting him in the head with his shield until the crest of his helm broke off. When Duncan threatened his eye with a dagger, Aerion yielded and withdrew his accusation. After the conclusion of the tournament and the death of Prince Baelor Breakspear, Maekar sent Aerion to Lys, in the hopes a few years in the Free Cities would change him for the better. Aerion stayed in Lys for a few years. It is rumoured that during his time there, he fathered several children. However, the truth and extent of this can never truly be known. It is also said that he served with the Second Sons, a well-known sellsword company, for a time while in exile. Aerion returned to Westeros at some point before the year 219 AC and the onset of the Third Blackfyre Rebellion. While the details of his exact role are not clear, it has been said he performed some actions that became the stuff of song for a while. After Aegor Rivers, a key Blackfyre general, was captured, Aerion and the Hand of the King, Lord Brendan Rivers, urged King Aerys the First Targaryen to put Aegor to death, but the king decided to send Bittersteel to the Night's Watch instead, a fate which he escaped, scurrying back across the narrow sea to plan yet another rebellion by House Blackfyre. Aerion was married to his cousin, Daeron Targaryen, the daughter of his uncle Rhaegal Targaryen. The marriage would result in one son, born in 232 AC, a boy they called Maekar, a foreboding name given the reputation of his namesake. The same year as his son's birth, Aerion Brightflame died screaming after drinking a cup of wildfire, foolishly believing that it would transform him into a dragon. Targaryen's eldest two sons impacted history in differing ways, with Prince Daeron often overlooked apart from his involvement in the tourney at Ashford Meadow, and more famous for his drunkenness, and of course Aerion Brightflame for the trial of 7 at Ashford and his actions during the Third Blackfyre Rebellion, and ultimately his descent into madness that cost him his life when he drank wildfire, believing he would become a dragon. But there are those children of King Maekar who earn their place in the annals of history for very different reasons altogether, having a far-reaching impact even after the eventual downfall of House Targaryen and into the Baratheon era of Westeros. We are of course talking about the then Prince Aemon Targaryen, the third son of King Maekar the First Targaryen, and his wife, Diana Dane, born in the year 198 AC. Being 23 years of age when his father became king in 221 AC at the death of his uncle, King Aerys I. He was named after his great-great-uncle, Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, by his grandfather, Daeron II Targaryen. Aemon was said to be a bookish boy and could often be found late at night in his chambers, delving into all kinds of books, from medicine to the histories of Westeros. He was also said to have been a softly spoken and quiet, always listening, with his counsel valued and respected, so much so many fall silent to hear it. Aemon had a sharp mind, was always calm and courteous. Aemon and his younger brother, Prince Aegon, sometimes pretended that their dragon eggs would hatch, so they could both be dragon riders together. It is said that Aemon was the one who gave Aegon his famous nickname of Egg, something that would stick for the rest of Aegon's life, and used by most of those who knew him on a personal level. Once, the brothers recreated the Battle of the Redgrass Field with painted soldiers on Maester Melquin's table, something they would often do, recreating many of the key battles in the history of Westeros. In Aemon's youth, his grandfather, King Daeron II Targaryen, had 4 grown sons, Baelor, Aerys, Rhaegal and Maekar. 3 of his sons were children of their own. Thus, the king felt that having too many potential Targaryen heirs was dangerous, citing the civil war of the Dance of the Dragons to make his case. It has been debated in the years since, given the tragic events that led to so many of these heirs of House Targaryen untimely deaths, that perhaps having a healthy number of heirs is never a bad thing, as you can never know what kind of misfortune may befall the realm. Yes, the Dance of the Dragons is fairly cited. However, the circumstances that allowed for the Dance of the Dragons did not strictly apply to Daeron's numerous heirs. Daeron sent Aemon to the citadel of Oldtown at around the age of 9 or 10, believing his love of learning and knowledge made him a perfect candidate to become a Maester. following in the footsteps of a son of King Aerys Targaryen, Prince Vaegon, who too became a Maester of the Citadel and was supposedly the one who suggested to his father to call the Great Council of 101 AC to decide his heir. Thus, despite becoming a Maester, men like Vaegon and Aemon can still hold influence within House Targaryen. Following the tourney at Ashford Meadow in 209 AC, Prince Aegon served as a squire to a hedge knight, Sir Duncan the Tall. Later on, when Dunk and Egg visited Old Town during the Great Spring Sickness, Aemon was said to have measured the knight's head, and also gave his younger brother a mule called Maester. Aemon spent years forging his Maester's chain, finishing his studies at the age of 19 in 217 AC. The now Maester Aemon then served at a lordling's court for the next few years. After succeeding to the Iron Throne, his father, King Maekar I Targaryen, summoned Aemon and his brothers to court, not wanting to sit on the small council as he felt he would displace the current Grand Maester. Aemon chose instead to serve at Dragonstone, the seat of his eldest brother and then heir to the throne, Prince Daeron. That is, until Daeron died of a pox. In the final years of his father's reign, Aemon would become the centre of a succession crisis and would eventually take the Black and join the Night's Watch as their Maester. He would remain at the wall for the rest of his life and died on a voyage to Old Town in the year 301 AC at the age of 102. But before all of that, Aemon Targaryen played a huge role during the events in the latter part of his father's reign. Before we discuss King Maekar's arguably most important son, his fourth son, Aegon, it seems prudent to take a detour to discuss his two daughters and their role in the history of House Targaryen. Baelor Targaryen was born in 199 AC and was the eldest daughter of the then Prince Maekar Targaryen and his wife, Lady Diana Dane. It is believed that once, in her youth, Baelor's sister Rhae gave a supposed love potion to their youngest brother Aegon with the intent that he would marry Rhae instead of Baelor, which implies that for a while at least, Aegon was supposed to marry his elder sister. While the pages of history do not chronicle much of the detail of Baelor's life, we can speculate some elements based on other information we have access to. Thus, we can say that later in life, Baelor did marry and had children, but ultimately her final fate is not known to us in any sources we have access to. Rhae Targaryen was the youngest child of King Maekar and Diana Dane, and while we do not know her exact date of birth, given she is younger than Prince Aegon, who was born in 200 AC, we can surmise that Rhae was born sometime between 201 and 209 AC, given her mother died around 209. We have already recounted the story of Rhae giving Aegon a love potion, which suggests that she wished to marry her elder brother. However, this desire never came to be, as Aegon married Betha Blackwood in 220 AC in a supposed love match. Much like Baelor, later in life, Rhae too was married and had children of her own, and again, the sources we have currently lose track of her, and thus we cannot say what her final fate was. Of King Maekar Targaryen's 6 children, arguably the most important is his fourth and youngest son, Prince Aegon, the future King Aegon V. While it took a string of misfortune for Maekar himself to ascend to the Iron Throne, it would take an even more unlikely set of circumstances for the crown to fall to Prince Aegon at his father's eventual death. Prince Daeron had died of a pox, caught from a whore, Aerion from drinking wildfire, believing it would turn him into a dragon. Then we have Aemon, who had become a Maester long before his father was even heir to King Aerys I. Therefore, the Iron Throne one day would pass to the fourth son of the fourth son, a series of events that no man could have foreseen and no odds would have favoured. In truth, the childhood of Prince Aegon was just as unlikely as him coming to the throne, spending his youth as a squire to a hedge knight, something not fitting for a prince of House Targaryen. But being the fourth son of the fourth son is what allowed this unusual path, as Aegon at the time seemed far removed from the line of succession. Many scholars of history point to this unconventional childhood as defining the kind of king Aegon would one day become, the good and the bad. Therefore, given its impact on events to come, now seems like a good time for us to document the early life of Prince Aegon, son of King Maekar, known forever in the pages of the histories as Aegon the Unlikely. Prince Aegon was born the fourth son and fifth child of the then Prince Maekar Targaryen and his wife, Lady Diana Dane, in the year 200 AC. Like most princes of House Targaryen, Aegon served at court in King's Landing for 2 years as a page, sometimes attending to the small council. In keeping with the traditions of House Targaryen, Aegon was given a dragon's egg in his cradle as a babe, which was coloured with green and white swirls. But as is the case with most of the dragon eggs after the Dance of the Dragons, it never hatched. However, despite this recent history, that did not stop Aegon and his elder brother Aemon hoping that one day their eggs would hatch so they could become dragon riders together. Aegon seemed closer with Aemon than any of his other siblings. The brothers would often recreate famous battles with small painted soldiers on the Maester's table at Summerhall, specifically the Battle of the Red Grass Field. While close with Aemon and indifferent towards Daeron, Aegon loathed Aerion, who he felt was cruel and sadistic. It has been said that it was Aerion who threw Aegon's pet cat down a well, and once he visited Aegon in his bedchamber during the dead of night, put a knife to Aegon's privates, and joked about removing them so he would become a girl whom Aerion could marry. At some point, Aegon's sister Rhae slipped a love potion into his drink so that he would marry her and not their sister Daela, to whom Aegon could potentially have been betrothed to at the time. The truth of the matter was that Aegon did not wish to marry at all. Instead, he dreamed of becoming a knight of the Kingsguard, who was sworn not to wed. Aegon's life would fundamentally change in the year 209 AC at the now famous tourney at Ashford Meadow. At his father's insistence, Aegon was supposed to squire for his elder brother, Daeron, but Daeron had no interest in jousting or fighting and instead drank himself into a stupor at an inn, leaving Aegon unattended. Before setting out for Ashford, Daeron had shaved Aegon's head to prevent the boy's distinctive Targaryen hair from being recognised by men sent by their father, an issue that Daeron himself need not worry about. When the hedge knight, Sir Duncan the Tall, came across the inn Daeron was drinking in, near Ashford, he assumed Aegon was a stable boy, calling himself Egg. Aegon was impressed by the humble hedge knight and followed him in secret after Duncan had declined his request to squire for him. When Sir Duncan later found Aegon at his camp, he agreed to let Egg serve as his squire during the tourney. When watching the opening lists of the tourney, Aegon was said to have been horrified at his brother Aerion's shameful actions by targeting his opponent's horse rather than the rider. When Duncan got into a fight with Aerion for attacking some puppeteers, Aegon intervened to save Dunk, but in the process revealing his true identity to the shock and horror of the hedge knight. Sir Duncan was arrested and sentenced to fight in a trial of 7. Aegon managed to convince Sir Lionel Baratheon to fight on behalf of Duncan. Aegon's uncle, Prince Baelor Breakspear, the heir to the Iron Throne, also fought alongside Duncan during the trial. But sadly, as Ashford has become well known for, Baelor died of his wounds inflicted by Prince Maekar, Baelor's brother and Aegon's father, who had fought on behalf of Aerion and House Targaryen in the trial of 7. Maekar, who at this time was styled as the Prince of Summerhall, wished Aegon to be trained as a knight, but Aegon would only agree if Duncan were the knight who trained him. When Maekar subsequently offered Duncan a place at the garrison of Summerhall, Duncan declined and agreed to take Aegon only if he accompanied him as his squire. Aegon would live humbly, but Duncan thought it would make Aegon a better man than his brothers, Aerion and Daeron. Thus, Aegon served as a squire to Sir Duncan the Tall under his nickname Egg. Such a decision by Maekar to allow his son not only to squire for such a low-born knight, but a hedge knight most of all, is perhaps one of the most unexpected and unprecedented moments in the history of House Targaryen. Little did Maekar know at the time, allowing his 4th son to travel down such a humble path would leave a huge impact during the final era of Targaryen Westeros. Much of Aegon's time as a squire is as of yet untold, but we do know some of the details of these formative years for the prince. Aegon kept his identity a secret from public, while at the same time he kept hidden in his boot a signet ring from his father should he ever end up in trouble. After Ashford Meadow, Prince Aegon and Sir Duncan spent some time in Dorne, escorting merchants from the Prince's Pass to Vaith. The pair also travelled aboard a poleboat on the Greenblood towards Plankytown. After leaving Dorne, Duncan and Aegon then sailed on the White Lady to Oldtown, where Aegon received a mule named Maester, a gift from his brother, the now Maester Aemon. A little less than 2 years after Ashford Meadow, Aegon and Duncan entered the service of Sir Eustace Osgrey of Standfast during his conflict with Roanne Webber, Lady of Coldmoat, over the Chequy Water. At Coldmoat, Egg verified for the illiterate Sir Duncan that the royal parchment from King Daeron II had granted the stream to Lord Wyman Webber. When Roanne demanded that Eustace turn over Sir Bennis of the Brown Shield, Duncan showed Aegon's signet ring to her in an unsuccessful attempt to avert hostilities. After Aegon slew Sir Lucas Itchfield in a trial by battle, Aegon pulled Duncan from the stream and then protected the wounded hedge knight during his recovery. Eustace and Roanne chose to wed to end their conflict, and Aegon attended Eustace during the wedding feast. Roanne gifted Aegon a sorrel palfrey, which he named Rain. After spending some time at Stony Sept in the Riverlands in the year 212 AC, Aegon and Sir Duncan the Tall attended the now infamous wedding tourney at White Walls. While there, Aegon struck the squire of Sir Malor after an insinuation that Prince Maekar Targaryen was a kinslayer who might one day intentionally kill King Aerys I to claim the throne for himself. Aegon attended to Duncan, who at the time was under the guise of the Gallows Knight, during his joust with Sir Uther Underleaf. Egg was distraught after Duncan's defeat, as the Hedge Knight would now have to forfeit to Uther his sword, armour and horse. The White Walls wedding tourney was actually a cover for the Second Blackfyre Rebellion, with Daemon II Blackfyre competing in the tourney under the guise of John the Fiddler. Aegon revealed his signet ring to Maester Lothar, who turned the boy over to Lord Ambrose Butterwell and Lord Frey. After Aegon claimed that his father was marching on White Walls with an army, Ambrose fled to the castle Sept with Aegon, while Lord Frey returned to the twins. Duncan slew Sir Tomard Heddle, and the knight tried to take the prince hostage. Duncan then told Aegon to escape White Walls if he could. The next morning, the Blackfyre conspirators were surrounded when Lord Brendan Rivers, Bloodraven, arrived with the royal host with Aegon in his company. Daemon II Blackfyre would be taken as a captive. Aegon convinced Bloodraven to lend gold to Duncan so he could ransom his possessions back from Uther Underleaf. After this, we know that Sir Duncan and Prince Aegon spent some time in the north at Winterfell. However, we currently have no record of their time there or any of their adventures after that. In the year 219 AC, we know that Aegon fought in the Third Blackfyre Rebellion, but much of his involvement during the conflict has not been documented as of yet. 1 year later, Aegon went on to marry Lady Betha Blackwood in 220 AC. Their union was said to be a rare love match, which saw no opposition at the time, as Aegon was far down the line of succession for the Iron Throne. They eventually had 5 children together. Aegon named his firstborn son, Duncan, to honour his friend and mentor, Sir Duncan the Tall. The following year, in 221 AC, Aegon's uncle, King Aerys I died with no issue and was followed on the Iron Throne by his last living brother, Aegon's father, Prince Maekar Targaryen. Aegon and his brothers were summoned to court by King Maekar. While in 221 AC, it would still take an unlikely series of events for the crown to fall to Prince Aegon. Over the 12 years of his father's reign, his elder brothers either died or refused the throne. Thus, once again in the year 233 AC, the 7 kingdoms of Westeros would be plunged into chaos, with the Peak Uprising and the unexpected death of Maekar at a time with no clear succession plan in place. In the year 233 AC, House Peak rose up against the Iron Throne and King Maekar Targaryen. House Peak had always been the most loyal of the Blackfyre supporters, but after the First Blackfyre Rebellion ended with Daemon Blackfyre dead in the Battle of the Red Grass Field, King Daeron stripped House Peak of 2 of their 3 castles, Dunstanbury and Whitegrove. Lord Gorman Peak would later be executed for his key role in the Second Blackfyre Rebellion. All this culminated in 233 AC with the Peak Uprising, in which House Peak is speculated to have hoped for the return of their stripped lands, with others also suggesting they hoped to fuel the Fourth Blackfyre Rebellion. King Maekar, being a leader of men, took command of the Targaryen forces himself, marching on the last remaining castle of House Peak, Starpike. Some sources state that King Maekar Targaryen, the first of his name, died assaulting Starpike, crushed by a rock hurled from the battlements. While the Peak Uprising was put down, it came at great cost, not just to House Targaryen, but to other houses across the realm. Not only was the king dead, with no clear heir, Robert Reyne of Castamere and Tywell Lannister, the heir to Casterly Rock, were also killed in the battle. Roger Reyne, the new Lord of Castamere, slaughtered 7 peaks after Starpike as revenge, but the damage had been done. Maekar was dead, and once again the 7 kingdoms of Westeros were plunged into chaos. With King Maekar's 2 eldest sons, Daeron and Aerion, also dead, there was no clear heir to the Iron Throne, made even more complicated by the fact there was several valid claimants to it. But one man had a solution for this chaos. Brynden Rivers, the infamous Bloodraven, the Hand of the King, the only man in the kingdoms with a plan. For only the 3rd time in the history of Westeros, a great council was called to decide the succession of Maekar. 233 AC. Hundreds of lords, great and small, assembled from every kingdom, and for the first time, the Dornish were present in a voting capacity. They met in King's Landing, and for a while, the city was overflowing with people, much to the delight of the innkeeps and brothel owners. Unlike the Great Council of 101, to decide between Viserys Targaryen and Laenor Velaryon, all 4 claimants were members of House Targaryen, which for some lords did simplify matters somewhat, with less political back and forth needed between the factions that formed in the halls of the Red Keep. There were 4 possible claimants identified by the lords present with a claim to the Iron Throne. The Great Council very quickly dismissed Maekar's eldest son, Prince Daeron's sweet but simple-minded daughter Vaela almost immediately. Many felt she did not have the faculties to make an effective ruler, while some scholars of history point to some trepidation given Vaela's gender and the prospect of a ruling queen. Very few also spoke up in favour of Prince Aerion Brightflame's infant son, a babe named Maegor. Such a young child as king would have meant a very long, continuous regency. The 5-year regency of King Aegon III from 131 AC to 136 AC was turbulent enough and almost ended in disaster several times over. The prospect of another regency, with it this time being possibly 3 times as long, was not a favourable outcome for the stability of Westeros. Maesters who attended the council on behalf of the Citadel also noted many lords objected, as there was some fear the boy might have inherited his father's cruelty and madness, and would live to rule like his namesake, Maegor the Cruel, a fate many lords rightly wanted to avoid all costs. Prince Aegon, the 4th and youngest son of King Maekar, was the obvious choice for many. He was 33 years of age and had been married for several years, already having several heirs who could follow after him, but there was a faction of lords who felt Aegon was not the suitable prospect he seemed on paper. They distrusted him, given his unconventional childhood, wandering up and down the realm with a hedge knight. Some even suggested that it left him half a peasant, and not suited to sit the Iron Throne. Enough hated Aegon, there was an effort made to determine whether his elder brother, Maester Aemon, might be released from his vows as a Maester to take the throne. When Aemon was approached with the idea, it is said he politely and quietly refused, ceding rule to his younger brother Aegon. Even as an accord among the lords finally began to be struck, as debates raged on over the final details, there was one last-minute complication. Out of the shadows came a claimant who appeared in King's Landing with no warning for most of the lords present, none other than Aenys Blackfyre, the 5th son of Daemon I Blackfyre's 7 sons. Aenys was born sometime between the years 191 and 193 AC, making him no older than 42 years of age. It later came to light that when Bloodraven announced there was to be a great council to decide the succession, Aenys had written to him from exile in Tyrosh, putting forward his case in the hopes that his word might win him the Iron Throne that his forebears had thrice failed to win with their swords. Some have rightly pointed out this was a naive move on Aenys' part, especially given the animosity between the Hand, Bloodraven, and House Blackfyre, but given there were few claimants, and none with an outright firm claim, some historians have suggested now may have been the time for House Blackfyre to attempt a more peaceful claim to the throne. Nevertheless, Bloodraven responded to the letter by offering Aenys a safe conduct first, promising no harm would come to him so that Aenys might come to King's Landing and present his claim in person. Unwisely, Aenys Blackfyre accepted Bloodraven's olive branch. Yet hardly had he entered through the gates of King's Landing had a contingent of gold cloaks and ravens' teeth seized hold of him and dragged him in fetters to the Red Keep, where his head was promptly struck off and presented to the Lords of the Great Council as a warning to any of those who might still have Blackfyre sympathies. While of course, most of the Lords present resented House Blackfyre, with many losing sons, brothers and fathers fighting the Black Dragon, there was a sense of unease at the underhandedness and dishonourable way in which Bloodraven went about the killing. With Aenys Blackfyre dead, Baelor and Maekar passed over, and Aemon refusing to accept the offer of kingship, there was only one clear choice left. Thereafter, Prince Aegon Targaryen, known to those close to him as Egg, was chosen by a majority of the Great Council. The fourth son of a fourth son, King Aegon V, would become widely known as Aegon the Unlikely, having stood so far out of the succession in his youth, only for the crown to fall to his feet. Defining Maekar Targaryen's 12-year reign as king between the years of 221 to 233 AC is a more troublesome task for scholars of history than it might first appear. That's not to say things of note did not happen during the reign of Maekar, but namely because it is heavily defined by events that preceded it and the events that followed it, with some historians making the case that Maekar's role in the long-term history of Westeros and of House Targaryen was most impactful before he even became king. Back when, it seemed like the idea of Maekar coming to the throne would have been preposterous, given how far down the line of succession he was. So what exactly was the legacy of King Maekar Targaryen? There are currently two schools of thought, each with their own merits being debated in the halls of the Citadel of Old Town by young maesters even today. The first argument is that Maekar's legacy can be defined by the events that directly followed his reign, and the unlikely rise to power of his youngest son, King Aegon V. The good and the bad of King Aegon V's reign is a debate for another day, but what we can say is those who misliked King Aegon V and voted against him at the Great Council of 233 AC did so directly because of choices Maekar made in regards to how his son was raised. It is well documented that King Aegon V cared greatly for the small folk, attributed to his unconventional childhood as a squire for a lowly hedge knight. And of course, when Aegon became king, he did enact policies and laws that benefited the small folk, with some seeing it as a cost to the highborn, which won him few friends, and deepened the resentment of those who voted against him. This different view of the world would also impact how Aegon would raise his children, with some arguing that the events Aegon allowed to happen did contribute indirectly to the eventual downfall of House Targaryen a few generations later. Therefore, some suggest, if that is Aegon's lasting legacy, Aegon is in turn his father's legacy, with many pointing to Maekar's choice to let him travel up and down Westeros with a hedge knight being such a defining part of who Aegon became. While all those are valid points, it would be amiss if we do not acknowledge the unconventional upbringing of Aegon did also have a hugely positive impact, given the troubled lives and personalities of his elder brothers, Maekar's first two heirs in Daeron and Aerion. The more humble childhood given to Aegon gave Aegon a much more balanced view of the world and stopped what some would call the rot that had infected the princes of House Targaryen during the reigns of Aenys and Maekar, and allowed Aegon to be a fair and good king, despite some of his politically dividing decrees he would make. But it does seem disingenuous to define Maekar's legacy by the actions of another. The second school of thought is Maekar's lasting legacy was in fact causing the death of his brother, Prince Baelor Breakspear, during the Trial of Seven at the tourney at Ashford Meadow in 209 AC. While most would agree his brother's death was accidental and part of the risks of such an event as a Trial of Seven, Maekar would never shake the rumours by some that he in fact meant to kill his brother as a way to bring himself closer to the Iron Throne. While of course, being tainted as a kinslayer was rightly something Maekar would be concerned about, the idea in itself loses weight when you consider that even at this time, Maekar would have still been far down the line of succession. as proven by the actions of Aegon V at the wedding tourney at White Walls that turned into the Second Blackfyre Rebellion. It is clear that even to Aegon, the idea of Maekar being possibly seen as a kinslayer was a sore point. But the reality of the situation is, from what little we know about Maekar as a person, he lamented his brother's death for the rest of his life, marking the anniversary of it each year, with it reported that it deeply troubled him further as he found himself becoming king, the very thing his brother was supposed to be. No matter if you believe Maekar meant to kill Baelor Breakspear at Ashford, or it was a terrible accident, so common in tourney combat, you cannot deny the impact Baelor's death had on the histories of Westeros and House Targaryen, with it sending us down a very different path than was expected, directly leading to two succession crises, and inadvertently setting the stage for the final era of Targaryen Westeros that led to the downfall of the house. But even if you choose to ignore this aspect of the tragic loss of Baelor, or even the small folk tend to point to, is ultimately the loss of a man who could have been a truly great king. A king to go down as a legend of the ilk of Aerys the Conciliator and Aegon the Conqueror himself. How true that statement is, we will never know, but from what we do know of Baelor Breakspear as a person, he certainly had all the markings of a man destined to become king of legend. He was a fearless and skilled warrior, with a deep sense of honour, who was willing to stand against his own family, putting his own life at risk to defend a no-name hedge knight, whom he owed nothing to, but he did so as he deemed it the right thing to do, and the just thing to do. Sadly, doing this cost Baelor his life, but it tells you everything you need to know about the man. The loss of Baelor was not just a loss for House Targaryen, Maekar most of all, but also the potential future of the Seven Kingdoms. The death of Baelor in the context of events to come is certainly one of the biggest what-if moments of Targaryen history. While the second school of thought holds much more weight when it comes to Maekar's legacy, it is fair to also discuss what Maekar did during his 12 years as king and assess it in its own merit. For the most part, the 12 years Maekar was king was peaceful, falling in between two Blackfyre rebellions, something the realm as a whole was grateful for, given the damage the Blackfyre rebellions had caused. Maekar offered the realm stability and time to rebuild that it had lacked during the reigns of his predecessors. There are many theories as to why his reign was peaceful, despite the looming Blackfyre threat, but the general consensus is it came down to the kind of man Maekar Targaryen was: stern and powerful, a fierce warrior who was also considered harsh and quick to condemn, a king who would personally lead his lords and smallfolk into the thick of battle from the front lines. All that came together to produce a king men would listen to, a king that commanded respect and loyalty, a king with a strong will that had perhaps been missing from his immediate predecessors. Thus, rebelling against such a king would not have been an easy task, and one perhaps Aegor Rivers, Bittersteel, and the surviving Blackfyres in hiding did not see a favourable outcome to. Many question why, at that very moment in the year 233 AC, House Peak attempted an uprising, with the aims and goals being very much lost to history, but it was a mistake they would come to regret, even if the siege of Starpike did cost Maekar his life and cut his reign short. Sadly, we will never know what kind of king in the long term Maekar could have become, and the direction he would have taken the realm, and kind of influence he could have had on Aegon V, given more time on the throne. What is the legacy of King Maekar Targaryen? His son, Aegon V, the death of his brother Baelor, the 12 years of peace and stability he brought to Westeros. Maybe all of them, perhaps none of them. But what we can say is this: Maekar Targaryen was not a bad king, but neither a good one. He was not a misruling tyrant, nor a king of legend. His account of good and bad is mixed, with the bad standing out more so because of the impact it would have in the long term. Perhaps we should look at the reign of Maekar Targaryen as a turning point in the history of Westeros, where we entered the final era of House Targaryen before the House of the Dragon finally fell.